Hi, I'm Susan.
I'm Hillary,
I'm Kathleen.
and you're watching Word of Mouth.
I've never heard anything so pathetic. Do everybody a favor and go and live in the West. It's where you belong, you bedwetter. If it wasn't for 11 million Soviet military dead, your little country would be a German province now. And you wouldn't be bellyaching about your socialist right to piss everywhere except in the toilet. You'd be smoke up the chimney.
Rock and roll is about the communist and immediately post-communist period, Czechoslovakia, beginning in 1968, I believe, which is when the Russian tanks rolled in, and ending around 1991 after the communists are out.
Jan is a doctoral student at Cambridge, and he's Czech. And when the revolution begins in 1968, he goes back to Prague, and he stays there for the 22 years. Meanwhile, he has kind of forged a connection with a professor at Cambridge who's a communist, so he's a British communist. And you see the parallel lives of the two professors, basically, and how one is a communist in England, and the other one is actually living in the revolution in Prague.
There were some themes in it that were universal themes about what is freedom. Do you have freedom when you can say whatever you want to? Do you have freedom when you can move where you want to move?
There was an idea about the collective versus the individual ideologies that I thought was very interesting.
It really deals with the connection between revolution and rock and roll, and how a lot of the songs of the era sometimes directly affected politics, and also really affected kind of the consciousness of the youth.
I remember going to Woodstock and hearing Country Joe and the Fish singing, "What are we fighting for?" And in this play, that's what the rock and roll was, what was such a threat to the Soviets and to the Czech government. And in fact, one of the characters says that all they wanted to do was do their music, and the government made them into protesters and dissidents, not the musicians themselves.
People cared about rock and roll and what they were doing on Saturday night and whether they could get coffee, and not the idealism of it.
The set was very interesting because the set was on a turntable, and it would go from Cambridge in England to Prague.
It was a rotating stage, so you had different scenes at different times, and as they rotated, you knew that you were in Cambridge, you knew that you were in Prague, and it was just very well done, very subtle, but very professional and very evocative.
The way that they moved from scene to scene was that they would have a blackout. It wasn't even fade to black, it was a blackout, and then they would have rock and roll music playing very loud, and then the credits for the rock and roll music.
It was something that I didn't like about the play. Each year, or sometimes more than 1 year will pass, is demarcated by a black screen that comes down in front of the stage, and they light the year you're about to see, and they're playing some great rock song.
But I think it made the play very long. And if they had cut some of that or reduced the length of it, it would have been easier to sit through.
The cast in this was amazing, and they're people who I knew from other shows, or particularly if you watch any British television. A lot of them do British television.
Sinead Cusack played the dying Eleanor in the beginning, Max's wife, and then in the second act she plays her daughter as she has aged.
She just really is a chameleon. And in this play, you get that sense. I mean, she is completely natural in both roles. You believe her in both. If you're not sitting right in the front, you might not even realize it's the same woman in both roles. She's that good.
I particularly like Jan. He was played by Rufus Sewell.
Because he's Czech, when he's speaking, when he's supposed to be speaking Czechoslovakian, he speaks very fluently in his natural voice. When he's supposed to be speaking English, he speaks English with a Czech accent and kind of a broken English. And you really get the sense that English is not his native tongue, and there's that kind of difference between the fluency that was very well done.
Brian Cox played a communist who was a staunch communist who did not want to give up what his values were, which was the pure communist ideal.
He was just spot on, kind of spouting the communist line and sticking to his guns no matter what was going on in the world around him that might contradict his beliefs, but sticking to it, throughout his life. Alice Eve plays Esme, and she plays Esme's daughter, Alice.
She had it down pat, and, for someone who works with teenagers all the time, it was just right on.
My friend and I left, and we immediately had all of these things to talk about. And to me, that's what great theater is about, that you leave the theater and have a lot to talk about.
It's the kind of play that if you like to sit around and discuss politics or philosophy or world issues over wine or just dinner, this is a play for you.
It was a phenomenal play. I mean, a really wonderful theater experience.
As far as what I've seen and what I know about, I think that this is the best show on Broadway for people who want to go see something that they're going to be talking about for a long time afterwards.
You convince yourself that everything's going to end badly. But look, when the Russians invaded, you would have bet on mass arrests. The government in jail, everything banned, reformers thrown out of their jobs, out of the universities, the whole Soviet thing, with accordion bands playing Beatles songs. I thought the same thing. I came back to save rock and roll. And my mother, actually. But none of it happened. My mum's okay, and there's new bands ripping off Hendrix and Jethro Tull on equipment held together with spit.